Welcome to Wickerson Studios. I'm going to give a pretty lengthy tutorial on a very playful way to play with KUKA PRC along with FologramAR, which I won't go into because I have to record through my phone. But this entire script I'll be putting FireFly in, and as you can see, start to mess with this robot in a very basic way, planar shifting and twisting. And there it is behaving. I think, you can see how I can start to have an audio effect on it. Now let's build it from scratch and see how long this video takes me to do it. So I'm going to keep this little wonderful thing tucked up top. I may not copy the entire script, make it available on my Patreon for those that want to see it in full detail. But let's just get into it and think about how we'd make something. So this one, it might be best if I go in and I just set it to false and reset it. And it would certainly help if I pulled this aside. Don't think I need it over here. Oops, need a little more out of the way than that. I just got an update. It's always distracted. We'll see what kind of weird emails we get if I try and go. I don't usually do tutorials. So what we're going to do is jump in here to a new Rhino, downsize it, and probably have to open up Grasshopper again. It's going to have a lot of problems because I've been pulling in so many plugins. So we will replace all those, and I think there's a bunch of things from a past file that are kind of doubled up on my computer, so I'll just ignore that and ignore that. All right, so Grasshopper's here and ready. First thing I like to do is I do have a plugin bifocals, which I like to bring in because as soon as I bring it in, I can start with a very simple idea of file, save that document. And I'll save this one as, well, Mitchell Farley really inspired it, but I think what I'll do is go into desktops. Where shall I put it? Something robotics oriented. Oh, I thought I had some robotics here. 21, we'll go into the test examples. And this is more of a, I'm going to pick and place. It's more of a drilling or engraving or drawing tool. Maybe I'll put it in the drawing tool. The tamper, FireFly. Yeah, that one's getting close there. So we'll just say tutorial. And I'll put this one up on GitHub when I'm done. So what we're going to want to do, and I probably will do this out of order, is I definitely want to be using a bunch of different things. I'm going to be wanting to use my FireFly audio file. I'm going to want to sound capture sometime in here. I'm probably going to want to get into KUKA and grab a big monster robot and use that at some point. I will probably need a KUKA PRC core that will do some jazz and do some things. I might have to import some things and files from other things as well. FologramAR AR, I might have to go in here and just sync an object. So you'll want to download a couple of these plugins. I probably will sync material. Oops. I'll probably sync objects, and I probably will have to sync parameters, and that will come in handy later on. What else am I going to play with? Well, we'll see. We'll try and use these. Probably the first and foremost, the best thing to make, if I don't get lost in here, is we'll just probably know that those ones are all going to be in use. We know that they're there, but it might be nice to disable them so I'm not getting in any funky business to start. What would I do to start? I guess I'll look at my other script and do this. So there's a bunch of fun things that Mitch Farley had done because just like any coding, what had been done was a visualization of the audio data. So if I began with that and started with this tool and brought in the sound capture from FireFly and activated that, make it enable, it's going to need a time period. And I'm going to set the time period number slider to a very small number. I'm going to set it at 0.02, which would be 20 milliseconds, and in doing so I'll have to get a timer that matches that for this to work. So you'll want to go in and grab yourself a timer. Oops. Timer. I don't usually do this, and I'm usually much more timer. Oh boy. Timer should definitely be there. Is that the one? No. Ah, strange. Let me just go back up here for a second and see where this tool is. It's in my params, and it is over here, which I forgot that's actually where it was, because I don't use it very often. Timer, utilities, input, timer. Where are you? What a slowdown. Utility, timer, trigger. Oh my gosh. Primitive time. Give me a second on. Okay, interesting. Input. It's called under utility now a trigger, not a timer. So it's an old file from my other file, and I'll have to drag that in here, and then I will want to set my trigger to an interval, and I want it to match to 20 milliseconds. Okay, so that should be it. I've got that up and running. I do need a Boolean toggle to start this, so Boolean toggle, I will have that set to true to start. And what happens is this is starting to give me data, and I'm going to use a data recorder to gather that. So I'll go once again back up into params and go to utility and data recorder, and I'll pull that in, and I should be having some interesting data coming out of here as a number, and in doing so I'm going to start filing this into something to amplify it. So I've got some numbers reading here, pretty nice, 226 values, and I'm going to do a little bit of a multiplication through that 1.000 so I can play with that and amplify it up and down. I'll probably bring it down to like 0.8, something like that, maybe 0.9 to start. So this is giving me data, and it's not doing anything yet because it's not reading the data. And I have to think how I can get this to go on. So false and true. And I might want to visualize my data at any time, so you're always using params to take a look at what you have. So it is giving me all this data, which is kind of nice. So there's my data recorder. It's pumped out a little bit of information here. And what would I do with that data then? The data on the top sheet is a range of this information playing on the audio, but I think I have it deactivated on the other one. Just let me get through here and turn that to disable. And now this one, if I go in here, hit it enable, reset it, I think I should be playing with a little bit of data, but that's what I have so far, so let's continue through with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pulling that data down into a planar shift to change where my robotic planes are, what they're doing and moving. I am curious, I think the timer, trigger, remote target, sound capture, I'm just going to hit play on it, and I think, check. There we go. It should be running, and it should be giving me more data every time there's a second to go through here. But there just seems to be something happening here. False, true. Give me a second. Okay, everything's fine. I just had to remember that it had recorded that data, and it just keeps recording this data, so it keeps adding more and more to it. So we've got our little tiny FireFly capture up and running right now, and we might want to call that something so we know what it is, and I'll call that audio data. And we will just take that and give it a group, and I might pull in, just for clarity, a scribble tool, and I will double click on that, and I will call that an audio data, and that's kind of the output. Let's make that huge, and there we go, and we'll pull that in and add to group. So now we got our little audio going, and we've got a little bit of numbers that we can affect anything with our voice as we're playing with this. So that's your start to FireFly. Not too complex, but what would I do with it? What I am going to do is jump into here and produce a curve, or anything would work, really. I'm going to produce a kind of varying curve, which makes for excitement, at least in my mind. And when I think of generating things, I usually go down and I'll grab Populate. We'll do a Populate 3D, and we've got a little area that we can, first of all, it's nice because you look in here and the region demands a box. So then I'll go over to surfaces and I'll say, well, let's make a surface box. The box says it needs a base plane. So then I'll go in, and this is kind of unnecessary, but then I'll construct a plane. And I just kind of work backwards from this, and then I don't want to run out. This is just building a little geometry down in here. You can see how small it is right now compared to our overall image and where the robot's going to be. I like the seed tool, but we'll get there. But basically the plane obviously comes from a point. And I usually do this until you can find your shortcuts. And then I want to lift that up on my plane. I'm going to use a pretty big digit of raising it to Z, so that point I can actually play it all the way up to 700. And I will just zoom out so you can see that plane, that point, the plane, and the numbers. I'll just pull down here. And this is just for visualization purposes. And what would I have to do with that? I'll probably put a number count to construct a line over here. One thing I can do in the box is I can designate a pretty big number as well. So because we're going to need some pretty big numbers to play with the KUKA robot, because it's pretty big in millimeters. So there we go. And I'll just move my face because I love to use this tool on standard. And I've got this set up kind of awkward. I usually like to put that down there. Come on, get in there. There you go. And that way I can do my zoom extends all and get everything figured out. And now I've got a surface that I'm actually just going to grab a small count of 4 count. And I'll probably seed it anywhere between 1200 seeds. And that way I can get all these different points over here in my populating 2D. And from that, I can very quickly go to curves and produce, probably the best curve to play with is, I think that's an herbs curve there. Just grab a vertices, and now we have a line that we can actually play with, seed it around and change it. And I always like to visualize things by using the gene pool and a variable pipe. So back into my surface, I'll grab a variable pipe, and that pipe needs, here I'll probably take a gene pool. I'm not sure how many I'll put it through. Probably need at least 20, but I think 10 would work fine as well. Let me just check what I have. I should get it in sync with this. So if this is 20 milliseconds and this is giving me 640 bits of data, that's a lot that's been gathered already. I am going to just set this edit over to 12 items, and I'll choose a 3-point decimal place, and I'll run it from 0 to maximum 1. And I'll hit OK, and then I'll just kind of play this off from 0 all the way through the curve that I'm actually setting up my radii at different points as we move through this. And I think 12 points will be enough. Just kind of choosing this as to what I want all the way from the start of the line to the end of the line. And that data can go into the parameters. The curve itself can come from here. And the radii will end up being my information that's coming out of this chart, but I've got way too many numbers coming out of here. I've got 7,000 numbers, which is not what I want. So what have I done incorrectly on my things here? 0.02, a trigger 20 milliseconds. I've got this so small. My data recording, I pulled my volume out, so it shouldn't be too bad. And my data should not, give me 1 second on multiplication, I'll check. So you also want to go into here and take a look at the record data and go into the record limit and set that. I set it to 12, and whatever you end up setting that record data to, you'll have to remember to do that. That needs to match your gene pool so your variable pipe will work. And you can see that that data now is generating 12 numbers always. And I can prove that through a param viewer. And you've always got 12 numbers on the end of it, and it's applying those to this curve. And you can see passing through that curve is a radii that I definitely probably want to thicken up. And since it's a multiplier, I'll probably take the edit and crank that up, maybe even to 100, and see the amplification. There you go. Now I can visualize, and that's a little too loud. Let's bring it down so when I talk, woo, I can make it pretty big if I hoot and holler. but that's going to have a digit that's going to really play off and change the size and scale of this. And I'll probably have to rein that back in to a very small number because as I bring in my KUKA, that's going to set the scale of what I have here. So I think what I'm going to do is bring that down to 11 and just deal with that right now as we are visualizing this information. We're going to get onto this Fologram and all these things in KUKA later on. But what I would call this is a tool that would be the audio visualization. You can go farther into this with the pipe, and this is something that Mitch does very nicely. Get into displays, grab yourself a preview, grab your geometry, and then create a material from that. And there's many ways to do this. I just kind of do that, and then I'll just go back in and I'll grab myself an input color swatch and put that in as a diffuse color and maybe change that to something I like. And there you go. You get the effects of making a little visualization of the sound. So let's take that whole unit, put that into a group, copy a little scribble tool here and slide it up, add that to the group, add to the group, and then let's edit this and call that what we want. What did I call it? My other one, I call it audio visualization. Visualization. This could be a long video. I hope you can bear with me because I'm just trying a bunch of different things. I'm going to deal with intermediate, advanced, sort of, but mainly some basic things as well. So what do we do after we get our audio visualization? There's other exercises that I'll have in my file that I'll leave, and at this point I'll probably consider what I'll do in augmented reality. So I like to just separate these Fologram groups and grab another tool and just pop that in there and get ready if I end up applying this add to group. And we'll call this one, call this one FologramAR in case I end up using it. Right now we're not going to have anything hooked into it, but any tools that I activate, like number sliders, you can activate up to 3 for free. I'll probably pull those up in to here if I'm actually going to make them part. I'll take them out of this group and pull them into the Fologram area. And I certainly will have to link any final geometries to this sync. So you basically just grab whatever geometry you had and then pull that in to Fologram if you want. But I'm not going to do that right now. So Fologram's all prepared and ready to go. And what we have to do is consider the KUKA and the KUKA robot to set the scale on what we're doing. So we've got audio data and we have audio visualization. At this point, it's going to get a little more complex, and I'm going to play around with some audio shifts, Folograms there, and I'm going to kind of begin with how I start to think about KUKA robotics, and I usually go into the examples of Carl Singline and start playing around with those as best I can. One of the objects you're going to need are the two that were here, so I'm just going to grab my KUKA core and give myself lots of room to work with this. I'm going to activate it, enable. This is going to set the scale, and I'm also going to grab that robot here. I'm going to pop it in the robot tool, and now being able to see it, I think I can do my preview on, and I can do my preview on here, and my preview enable. The only thing I have to do is apply, exit, and I will have to put in a list of commands. Oh, that was my KUKA tool. I'll probably have to activate my KUKA robot. Should be fine. 3700 KUKA. Maybe I'll do that one instead. Go up into here. And where's my monster KUKA? Thought I had it here, but maybe I don't have it anymore. KR90. Oh, where are you, monster? I guess we can just use that one. KR20 sounds big. That one looks big. Let's grab this one. And that's going to be the robot I'll probably end up using. And collision geometry, it's going to ask me for a simulated time. I'm going to type it 1.0000, and I may show you another kind of time simulation that can work. And I will need a list of commands to actually get things up and running in here. So I am going to merge a series of commands because it's going to take a few in this video. We'll go down here and grab a merge tool, and the merge will be the commands that come in. And then I will grab the data, and I think what I'm going to use is go to petition point of KUKA. So virtual tool, not tool path, probably core, a PTP, which is a point through plane through point or point through plane. I think that's what it is. As a command line, pop that in. See if this is going to start running some things. I have a target plane, a status turn, and a speed. And I'm also going to use the drill lines, a linear movement, and another linear movement. So I'm kind of following my other script and seeing if this makes sense to me. And then I'm going to have to provide some data for this. And that should be enough. And every data that I bring in, I will end up grafting all this data coming through just so that all the data streams, data trees line up and work. I am going to need a custom tool also, and I will get into that. Virtual tool, custom tool PRC, and we'll build the geometry for that. And you'll see how I build a branding tool as well, which is kind of fun. And we will just pop that one in as a tool, and I'll probably just set the tool to confirm to get it up and running. And what I will come back on here is say we basically have to work through orienting the planes, which is something I'm going to play with and do some geometry, but we'll get it basically working to start. So you will need a plane orientation, orient plane for this one, and you will need an orient plane for the second one, and you can use the first one to do both. You can use the first one to orient this plane and also orient the last plane, and this one will be different to orient this one, which will be orienting to a point. Both will be oriented to a point, so I have to produce that point. I'm going to pop in a point here and say I'm going to orient to this point and orient to this point, and that point will be defined by probably I will just set that point as the XYZ point, which is the easiest way to start. And the planes coming out, I will start to twist and turn them because I'm creating planes. I'm basically going to create, I think, plane normals, one of which will play into this one, and another one that will play into this one. And now you see, as soon as you get that, you've got some data, and you can start to put your robot in. And there it is. Now I'm taking a look at it, and I can see the orientation to where my surface is, where I'm going to go with that curve, what's going to happen, what is the tool paths. But some people, Carla obviously works it the other way, but I always usually end up writing my scripts, at least tutorial-wise, looking back at why I wrote them backwards. And that's a little frustrating to some people, but now we're going to build the geometries to make this happen. I'm going to have one little peek into my tools, setting the tool. I'm going to set my tool at the size I'll end up needing it, which is ridiculously 980 on the Z and then minus 90, minus 90. We'll do that now. So 980 on the Z, and we'll do a minus 90 and a minus 90 here, and we will apply that. And you can see there's already conflicts with the KUKA saying I'm going to collide and I'm going to have trouble with myself. And then let me leave this one, confirm and exit, confirm and exit. And the KUKA, let me go up and see what settings I had on it. 2000 at the base X is going to move it out of the way. So I'm going to move that over here and orient that 2000. I don't have a real robot, and this is all for augmented reality in my backyard. So once I get in here and learn how to type, this is weird. Just having trouble with my screenshot, trying to do something. Let me exit this, exit this, exit this. Let me double click here and see if I can't type in 2000. There we go, and apply and exit. And now my robot's moved back and out of the way of my surface, which is actually generating this kind of visualization of what's happening. And I can come back down to this visualization, audio visualization, get rid of all this other stuff. So I'm only seeing that line as kind of representation of what I'm going to say. This line visualizes what I'm going to disrupt, hopefully disrupt the KUKA at running smoothly. Now the KUKA itself is not on a play tool right now, but I do have a simulation that I can take it through all of its paths from start to finish. And right now it doesn't really know what to do. It's just taking a simple move. So I'm going to come back into here, zoom extends all, and you see you can basically show it how it's going to start and stop on one single point. Now we want to start providing lists of information to see what happens. Our KUKA's up and running. It's ready to go. You want to basically take points into points to in a safety distance and points in a drilling points to what will actually happen with this. And outside of drilling, we're actually branding or we're tamping a sand mold. So that's what I'm thinking about. So let's jump back into here and see where we're at. I definitely want to take some information and move things. And this is where it gets pretty interesting. I'm going to go back into my, I'm going to have to start building some geometry as to what is going to actually happen. So the KUKA is forming here. We'll just put this into a group for now and set it over onto a color yellow as a little bit of warning that it's not done, but it's up and running. Now, what would I build now? I definitely want to build an area for drilling and where I would drill between toolpaths there. So what I'm going to do is probably under my audio data, let me take a look where I am. I would start with another cloud of points populating. Actually, I'll probably populate geometry. And I'm going to grab something fairly simple, surface, curves, primitives. I'll grab myself a polygon to start and zoom on in. And I'll say, well, that polygon is going to be pretty big. And I'm going to grab the data. I have to take a look here. This is where I'm getting into some number sliders. That is going to be my base shape, my plane, number of sides. I've either got my point seed or my number of points. I'm going to keep my number of points fairly small, but let me see what I have to feed into my, let me slide up my data here so I see exactly what I'm doing. 1 second. Yeah, this is kind of shared data in a couple of piles, so it gets a little messy. Radii, I'm going to play up pretty big. I'm going to play up to a 855 millimeter count, so it's a big radii what's happening. You can see I have a nice surface that I'm going to generate points between. The segments is going to be generated by a number slider, which I will call the base shape. And we would just give that a number slider of 6 to start, so it'll go from 3 to 10. And actually, if you're going to use polygon, you might want to go into Edit menu and make sure you have a minimum of 3 sides so it doesn't funk out on you. And 6 sides is all right, that's segments. And then you have a little parametric model to change the shape of that. I think we'll go down to 3 to start. The plane is already XY. It's okay to have that as a working area. It's under where we're data visualizing things. And with that said, let me kind of jump up into here. I will probably grab a surface because I like to populate areas. So I'm just going to grab a surface from those polygons. And then I like the tool of jumping in here and going into the grid tool, but saying populate geometry, which is nice because what that does is if you don't populate geometry and you just populate a 2D, you'll see the difference. If I populate 2D, it's going to go to a square image, the region, the geometry, the region. It's going to make it square, but the populate 3 geometry seems to take into account what shape is there. And then the seed I'll probably end up using, and the count I'm going to bring down to something reasonable, like a 45 count. And the seed can be anything. I just usually seed 12 and then take it through a run of 100. So now I can have less points or more points, whatever I choose to do. And I will generate a very quick mesh from that. So it's a little bit of everything here. The mesh is there, and there we go. I've got an interesting mesh that's made, and I'll probably take all that other stuff as building this geometry preview off. And we could call this just the base, what did I call it here? Actually, I should probably call it the segments, the radius. I could call it the point seeds. I call it the number of points. I guess that's what I'd end up doing down here on the base geometry for the path. So I think I will maybe take that to number of points. But either way, we could just group this. We know it's a piece of easy geometry. We could title it after, but it gives us a nice mesh. And maybe that's exactly what we'll do. We'll just jump in here and grab this. And I'm following loosely my script. Let's jump in here and say add group. And we'll just say base geometry. Yeah, and that'll be fine for tool paths. And that's just something I've done. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to probably, I've got a 3D scan. I'm not sure why I have that as a mesh, and I called it 3D scan. My dog's going a little nuts. Oh, it's because I'm having groceries delivered. Oh, thank you, Cindy. I'll take a pause for a sec. Okay, I will go back through and I'll just grab a quick little mesh. It's not called that. Just pull it out of there so I know I'm dealing with a mesh. What I'm going to do is follow through. So these are not only the mesh is there, but I call that. I think what I'm going to do is call that the kind of think of it as the scan, because you could just scan in any mesh you want. But I've created a mesh, so let's just call it created mesh. Created mesh. And then we also could pull out the data of points over here and call these points something like the tamp points. So let's just call those tamping points. And that kind of gives us our branding points, whatever you want. And in doing so, actually, this is a good technique to just do a quick little, if you grab one and put on group, then you can override that by saying, so this is the tamping points. And then that gives that a nice name. And the same thing here. If I jump in here and hit group, then I can go in here and say created mesh. And that's just a nice little technique to get around the bifocals tool. Now what would you do with it? We actually have to get the normals, which are not hard to do. And this comes from Carl's Singline, which is nice. You can do, because you're dealing with a mesh, you can do mesh closest point. Oops. Well, there it is. Pull in your mesh closest point down to your mesh, and your points will end up being a bunch of data that you've driven from here. And what I'm going to do with these points, if I just took these points and put them in here, they're just going to be all chaotic and out of order. So what I'm going to do is also go in and show you a little bit about C#, which is kind of fun, and you didn't think I'd be doing that. But we're going to try and bypass this with a C# node. And luckily I have all mine done. I don't know how much I want to go into here and actually type the whole script, because it's a really nice script online. It would take forever for me to teach it. I got it from a full tutorial, half-an-hour tutorial from Jose Luis. So what I'm probably going to do instead of that is jump in and say, you know, get on my GitHub, get my C# files, follow Jose Luis. But this is a wonderful sorting algorithm, sorting points XYZ to sorting by XYZ to sorting XYZ with optimization. And there it is. I can take points, and then I can actually go from this script, the sorted points. I can actually type in here X, smaller caps, smaller large caps. I can type in bump. I can type in X, Y, or Z, how I want to do this. And we will just make this the Y. And you might want to even sort by Z. And why this is something that you probably, and I think what I'll do is I'll sort by X. I'll leave this here, and I'm not going to show a tutorial on it because really Jose Luis' tutorial covers it. But get into the habit of learning how to write from other people's tutorials, basic scripts. And it's a short one in the end, but he goes through so many steps to show you how to write this one and then condense it and actually use a little bit of the power of Grasshopper to deal with, I think down here, dragging in the point coordinate. It's a techniques that you can input those point coordinates and invent them yourselves and do a kind of else if to begin with, I guess an enumeration to your XYZ. So it's not the biggest script in the world. It's there. I do share those files. It's I don't know if this one's up on my GitHub yet, but it's the C# shorting files that I'll put up onto it. So that's going to slow down people that think they're going to do a tutorial and just quickly grab that. Now, it's not that important. You could. The difference between this is when you run the robot goes to any point, you know, wherever it wants. And the difference is you can actually start to gain some control and be reasonable. And of course, you want to improve this for a robot, because if you're coming across the surface this way and coming up in the X, you'll probably want it to not have to come here, reset here, and then go back to the beginning again. Like you want it to go here and then come back on this line and then go this way and this line. But how it actually runs is zing, 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 depending if you take the X to the Y. So hopefully that makes a little sense, but it's a nice use of a C script, and I noticed there's a lot of C scripts nestled into people that really know how to code in Grasshopper very well. So I'm going to close that one out, and we'll call this one, what should we call that one? It has a nice title, so you don't really have to do anything with it. Let's just group it and put it up here, and because it's such a little favorite of mine, I'm just going to go to color and jazz it up blue, and you've got your sort by points optimized right here. And that said, you're going to now find your face normals from your mesh, which is a nice little object here. I think I can find my face normals. I can never remember where it is. Face normals. Normals. I read all over the map. Let me just give a quick. Well, I know what it looks like. It looks like a triangle with a little normal coming off of it. Where are you? What a waste of your time watching me get lost in here. Analysis. There, it's got to be that. That looks like face normals. So you're going to analyze the face normals, and you're going to grab a list item, which is something I use all the time. It's always nice to see this. Grab your whole point list of your index, set that into here as a list, and then grab your normals into your list here. And now you're able to get your vector normals, and that's what's going to give you ending up what they are, which is nice. And they're all basically the same in this one, so it's not actually that. I think it's not actually that important. You got 45. We've got 33. So we're just going to call this grouped, and I think it probably would be best to scribble down, even though it's going to be big. Let's just put this one over here. Oh, let's take this one that's not there and group that one into here, add to group, pull that one over, and let's just go up, and we'll just call it get face normals. There we go. And that should be enough to make that a little fancy. Pull it up here and slide that one down here. I think we'll be all right. And then I think you can take everything off because you don't really need it. Not just preview off. We don't really have to see the other ones. So we've gathered up some information. We've got the list of normals that are in use. It's a flat planar surface, so it's actually not that hard. I think every single one coming out of it is 33 face normals, which we could have generated another simple way. But sometimes you're not planar. So now what I'm going to do is you're going to find my way. You're going to find out how I'm starting to network this back into the KUKA tools. I've got my list items of normals, and I have to find my plane normals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw on a little bit of amplifications, which can make this fun, and a little bit of a sorting tool, which is nice. And you'll see what I do here. I'm going to play between these two areas right now, and I'm going to make it a little larger just for now, just so you can see what's going on. Those normals are going to come into two vector amplifications, 1 and 2. And those normals are going to come in this vector here, and I'm going to amplify them by going all the way up. The Fologram, probably two sliders that I'm going to use in Fologram called safety distance and tamping depth. So safety distance and tamping depth, I am going to play around with. Safety distance right now is going to be very small. So we will grab a number slider at 0.0002, let's say 100, and we'll set that to 0, and that will be safety distance, which I think is what we want, and we'll call that safety distance. And then we will also do tamping depth. Grab this one, and I'm going to grab another number slider from -100 to 100, and we will call that one tamping depth. And there we go. We'll leave it at -100, and just make sure that I'm putting these in the right areas. Give me 1 second. Let's see. You gotta follow them up. Okay, this one's bottom. Good. They're in the right order. And we're also going to move those geometries, which were the sorted points geometries, through a move tool. I'm going to move those sorted point geometries through this vector list, and we're going to grab the sorted point geometries and move them through this vector list. And now what we've ended up making is a safe points in safe distance as we get into this through the move. And we're also making the tamping points, and those are going to flow right into that geometry into a, well, I was going to do a planar rotation, but for right now let's just take it and put it right into the plane. Well, we can do it through the, let me see, the plane normal, which is what I constructed. Hang on a second. Okay, let me think about this. The list item, the motion, which is easy. The list item is going to go into the plane normal, which I probably want to pull you over here and pull you over here. And the geometry is going to go into that origin. The geometry is going into this origin, and the z-axis is going to come out of the same thing here, the list of these points and the list of these points. And what we technically have is we can remove these things right here. We can remove these from this, remove from group, and you can start to see what we've ended up building. And this one is the same orientation tool used on both, but now we can call this area, all of this stuff, we can call that the tamping points. And I'm just going to label that tamping points. And then I'm going to take this section and I'm going to group that. And I'm going to call that the points in the safety distance. And I'll tell you, Carl Singline's a lot better at this understanding than me, but it is following. And then I've got these points that I orient to. And I'm going to take everything here, and I'm just going to take the visuals and preview off. The other two things I'm going to do is because these two items here, these two, the safety distance and the tamping tool, they're going to be the ones that I actually link with Fologram. And in doing so, I'm going to grab those and slide them up here into the Fologram area. And I'm going to add them to that. And that way they're stuck in there. If I actually want to take these to Fologram, I'll probably end up taking this little object over to them as well. So we're actually getting pretty good. And we've got our points. We've got our movement, plane to point, point to plane, I think it's called, linear movement. Through our meshed forms, we can take all of this wonderful jive that we don't need to see. And I can put that in preview off. And then we can see our robot in action. And we start to have these paths as to what it's doing. And this robot's starting to get pretty wild as to how it's going to follow it paths. And you'll see what's happening here is it's trying to run a robot for every one of the paths. And the one thing that will prevent that from happening is you take all your data and you flatten it. And that will allow one robot to have to run through every one of those paths. And you see how that is following a beautiful system all the way through that triangle. And there's a little something that's trying to happen. There's data visualization above it, and I want that voiceover, that visualization, to have an effect on the robot arm. And there's a very easy way to put that in. But before we get there, I'm going to deviate a little bit and steal an incredible tool that I will have that Carl Singline had created, and he warns against using. I'm going to cut and paste it in here and see where it showed up. And it's this thing called the KUKA PRC Play, which they don't have available for you. So you have to kind of be happy with this kind of very high definition 0 to 1 toolpath. And since I have it, I'm excited. The reset, I'm going to put it to a Boolean Toggle true, and that's going to have a reset. And I'm going to take the loop through, because then I can say I want this to run for 189 point whatever seconds. And now I've got this ability. I don't want to loop it, but I want to put the time in. I can put that right into here. And this is what I refer to, and I can pull this one out, remove from group. I can pull that one out and say that was the initial number that was working, but I call this my time simulation. So let's take a group and we'll jump in here. This is our KUKA, so we can have a little fun with that. It's not really named in any, there's no reason to call it a KUKA core, but that's what it is. Let me jump in here and grab one of these face normals. Bump, bump. Slide this one up into here. Add to group, and just do a quick time simulation. Time sim, which is nice. And bring that one down. And then let's grab that other face normal and bring it over here and throw it into our add to group, and double click on that and just say everything KUKA PRC. And so that's just something to stay in there. There you go. We have a great little object here in our KUKA core, and I can always, at this point, take it over to AR robot geometry and analysis. I can always take that over and run that into my, oh, sorry, I'm a little screwed up. Run that into my objects in the end for KUKA. Fologram. Now we still have a lot to do that we can play with, and I want to show you how we can use this FireFly. How can I use that data of FireFly, which is kind of separate from all this? If you see where it's going, it's not really connected. It's not really doing anything. It's not doing anything to the script. So what's nice is jump in here and take a look at this normal plane. That's what I'm going to play with right now. And I don't have my geometries and my tamper or anything, and I'm going to end on a very easy level. But what I'll do here is I'll say there's a plane. And the one thing I could do is go into where I know planes are, and I could grab a rotate, and rotate plane could be here, and I could take those planes and I could start rotating them by a certain angle. And I could mess with them by saying, okay, what is the planar shift of the audio? So how do I get this data out of here to do a planar shift, these numbers? Well, the best way to do that is come back here, and I think I've got an amplification on there doing something. I want to grab a number off of that. So I'm going to go into my params, I'm going to grab that number and say, let's start playing with this. And this is where I might have to fudge some numbers around. So I'm going to take that and say, I want to do something with this. I want that number to have an effect on something. And of course, I can just take those lists of numbers and put them in here. And then when I visualize those shapes, you can see I can start to turn them with my voice. So that's kind of exciting, but that's not what I want to do. I'm going to take that and I'm going to say, I'm not just going to rotate it in that X axis. I'm going to take that and put that to disable. I'm going to take those numbers and I'm going to rotate to 3D, and we're going to call this the planar shift audio. So let me just jump in here, and we'll just do this quickly. Slide this up, and always good to title things. And I'm just making it up as I go along. Planar shift audio. And let's see where that ends up leading us. That's going to be in a group with all these wonderful juicy things. But we're going to take it to a full rotation and transformations, which I like so much, called Rotate 3D. And what does that need? The data can be changed. So those number data, I'm actually going to take them through a little math tool of division. And that allows me to play with those numbers. I'm going to take that division down to something. I'm going to take it down to 56 point. I'm just typing in a number here from 100. I'm going to pop that into there. I'm going to have my data and say that's the angle of rotation, which could be fun. I also want to go down. Let me check where I'm pulling my planes centers. Get me in the math tool, in the surface tool, and grab myself the plane areas, which will give me a centroid, and that can be my center, a list of centers. And the axis can be something as simple as generating a line, which I do all the time, and I'll show you the long form to do that, which is not really that necessary. Spline, I think it's under, where are you? Primitives, line, start line, direction, that axis. And that axis is going to be driven by a point. And a nice way to make this quickly is use the point as that and use the direction as well. And then you can just put on a hard-coded number to offset it in any direction. So I'll just double-click and hit 1, quote 1, which will give me a number that people won't play with parametrically, hopefully. And then I'm able to grab a geometry that I think, of course, I need the geometry to rotate. I need those planes to do that jive, and there they are. And now, you see, I can start to control those all differently as I speak. At different times, they're going to be like, hey, what the heck is going on? And that's kind of nice. So I've redone that, and I could take off a lot of those visuals right now. It's not really necessary, but at that point, this is the plane that I'm going to shove back into my tools. And at this point, as I run the script, now you can run the script just manually by taking it through 0 to 1, or you can hit this play tool. The KUKA robot will, sorry, I've got it on true, play, reset true. What is going on? I'm just trying to play through my iteration and why. Give me 1 second to figure out what I've done. The plane point orientation, that is giving me a series of geometries 33 that are changing as I speak to them. And of course I want my tool to follow those, and I might have to just go back into my KUKA PRC. Sometimes you have to do this and apply because you're messing with the scripts. That could be it. Let me hit play again. And the simulation is not running. False. Okay, there we go. I had it on false. I don't know why I had it on false. I need a true that I'm not false. That I'm not resetting it every time. So this thing is dancing. It's moving a little bit because of my voice, because of that audio planar shift. So I'm just going to put that in there and group this, and there we go. Sometimes I'll lose myself. Now, all we're missing is the tool that really tamps and brings itself down here. Ah! Woo! Oh, you can really play with the hooting and hollering in this. It might be too amplified for what I want. And there's some collision points with the KUKA. Once again, this is why I have to play with FologramAR and a KUKA PRC, because nobody's going to give me a nice big expensive robot to do this. Now the last things in here are so simple it's ridiculous. I think we started with a bit of geometries. They're the two following geometries to make this worthwhile. And we will go in, we built the mesh, which is driven by some data. But the other thing we did is we haven't made a tamper yet. And because I made a geometry that's kind of playable, from, I think, these. No, not those. Where were the geometries? I think there's a base geometry here. So what we have here is some interesting, let me see where I put it. It's these two scripts here that I will just grab, and I will take ungroup, and I will slide them down here because I think this is the base geometry that's interesting grouped together. But these are starting to become the parameters that I want to play with, not just in Fologram, but also just manipulating things. So I'm going to throw those into a group, and I'll throw it into a playful kind of blue, which says, you know, play around with these numbers. And I might end up titling these as well. And why don't we call those that what they are, which is the number of points. And that's the number of points in the base. And this is the point seed, which is interesting just to change that. The point seed, which would change the geometry. And now we're going to add a couple more number sliders to this as we build our tamping geometry, which shouldn't take too long. I will need a couple other number sliders, and I'm going to need one. Let's just play with 3.00999, and let's call that one the size of brand. And I think that's a multiplier, and you'll see why I'm making that in a minute. And we will make the sides of tamper or brand. Okay, we'll just do another one, and we'll set that to an integer because we're dealing with, and actually I'm going to set that one from 3 to 10, and that is the number of slides of brand, number of sides of brand, or tamper. I keep saying tamper brand, and we'll make that 4, which could be interesting. And we will have a base shape integer as well, because those will probably be working with a polygon. So we'll just call that the base shape. And also, because that's a polygon, we're going to take that and probably set that to a minimum of 3. Okay. And we take all those little things and pack them into this thing, add to group, and we can have a little bit of fun with those and see where we end up going. What I'm going to do with those sliders and information is definitely the first one's going to go into a division of I'm going to create, maybe I'll work backwards, build a tool backwards, which is fine. I'm going to do a solid union of things in the end to make a shape. I'm going to use a pipe tool to do it. So I might just hammer through this in any sense. So we will go in, and this is basic 101, creating a point, which is jumping into our form. I'm going to use a move on that point. I'm going to move that geometry probably in an XYZ direction. So you can sit in here and you can say X is an option, Y is an option, and Z is an option. And you can choose whatever you want, and usually you don't have to list all these. I'm going to be moving that on a fairly high level, 879 up. And if that's 879 up in the Z direction, that's telling me something. It's actually telling me a number that will make this tool work. So as I jump in there and see it's 980, I want that smaller because I want to tamp through the form. So 879 will work with my KUKA tool, which I've set at 980. So it will tamp actually through the shape. I'm making the tamper longer than to hit the surface. I don't want it coincident. I want it to actually push through it because it's about FologramAR. That might not make too much sense, but basically I've played around with geometry to make that work. The motion will be 2 points in those directions, and like I said, this is pretty 101. We can create a line between those two things. Go to curve and grab yourself a line. This is kind of nice. I'm going to try not to mess this up because it gets a little funky. And I want to grab a start point, and I want to grab an end point. I want to find a point on curve, which is nice in the middle. And I'm just building a geometry the old way I used to think about making grasshopper, which is why I like it. And I've done this for a while now. We're going to make another line, and we're going to grab the start point as this start point, and we're going to grab this midpoint as the end point. And I am going to create a polygon, like I said, primitives, polygon, and I'm going to bring that polygon to start around this geometry, which will be the plane. The radius will be the division of, and this is where I bring it back to my parameters. Let me see, it's the size of brand. So the size of a brand through this shape will be my division. And I will take this data, and the size of brand will be the dividing factor on that. You'll see how these start to build a geometry for me. And that geometry ends up becoming the radius. And the segments end up becoming the segments, which I said back here, the sides of the tamper. So we're going to bring that one in here as the segments. I think we're starting to get a pretty interesting shape. The problem is I've got a lot going on. It's very hard to see this because KUKA Robot's busy at play. So it sometimes helps at a certain point to grab all your jive and just turn that to, well, certainly turn the KUKA Robot to off. And we should be able to starting to see if I remove the audio geometry, planar shift off. And if I take this geometry, there should be another thing in here that's causing a little bit of trouble, visuals, preview off. But you can start to see that I'm building a little tiny object here, which I think is sitting high up in the air. And let's just continue with this line, the shapes that we're making. And we'll run through, and from our midpoint, we've made a second line. We've got on this curve, I'm going to divide this curve into curve tools and analysis. And I believe, well, I think there's division, dividing the curve, and the polygon section. The count itself will probably be very minimal, so I'll hard code that in as 2. And that will divide it. And now you can see I have some pretty good geometries as I start pulling things together. Those 2 points that are made available there, I've always liked the dispatch tool. And I flatten all my dispatch information so I can get it one or the other. And then with that one or the other, I can start to build more lines. And I used to build very primitively and simply this way, which I think is the intro of why you want to do this. Take your A list and go to your midpoint. And you've got this nice line shooting off to the side, and you can grab another line, and you can start with your B list to your midpoint, and there you go. Now you have even more geometries to play with. And in doing all that, we can grab our little pipe tool under surfaces, pipe, and we can start funneling in our curves, our shift in our curves. I believe I want to grab my polygon because I want to make that as well. That'll be the shape of the brand. Shift into there. And I also want, 1, 2, 3, 4, my line down here, this one here. So that one's in there. There, we should have 4 tucked into there. And then the radius of the pipe, I think, is one of my parameters over here. Base shape, sides of tamper, sides of brand. I've got a division tool on here. I just have a little, I don't know why I chose 64, but I did. 64, and that's a little number slider that I can throw into the radius, and if I want to play with the shape and change it up, I think I did a hard code into this. That one's pretty big. Let me see what I ended up putting in as my expression node. What did I put into my expression? Just 1 second. I just divided that by 2. And sometimes I play around in here, but it's very little that I do that. I'll just do x divided by 2 and set that, and there we go. I can bring it down to a decent shape. And I have spheres that I want to bring to certain points. I want the solid radius because I want a bigger sphere on there. I am going to create a solid here, and I will grab the base point into my solid, and I will take that parametric number there into here, so now I have balls at one end that can grab that's a little bigger. And so those are my two geometries that I'm going to merge into my tree, bits of data, and in assembling all those wonderful parts, I will take them through having a tree of data and a single piece of data. I will do a solid union between these, and I think the best way to do that would be solid union. There we go, and I should be able to pull it in and it should be fine to give me one object, well, a bunch of objects. It shouldn't be a list of objects. Oh, it's because I haven't flattened my data. So flatten my data, and then it should have a single item. It's just taking a second to, yeah, one closed brep, and that closed brep itself ends up feeding into my tool, into my KUKA robot. And where is my KUKA robot tool? Right there, KUKA PRC. So we're going to go from this tool over to that tool, and that should be enough to do it. And then I can take off all this funk, because that's my crazy geometry for my tamper, and we'll just put that into group, and we will call that custom tool geometry. These are interesting little parameters that are tucked around here. Add to group, we will call this custom tool geometry. Oops. Nope. What's going on? There we go. I'll just pop this one down into here, add to group, and we'll call that tool geometry. I think for some reason we should be done. I just want to take off all this stuff so we have it off, and probably that will run through my KUKA full geometries as well. And you've got a very interesting toolpath that jiggles and wiggles and giggles, and when you run it as a simulation, you can twist and torque and affect it and mess with it and talk to it and feel like your robot really cares for you and you're a special person. And that's a lot of stuff that can then be brought into, and I kid you not, FologramAR. As long as you think things, Fologram, type it in just like you typed in grasshopper, grab yourself your QR code and go crazy and put it on your cell phone and impress your friends that you can talk to things that are imaginary or augmented in real life. I hope you liked that. It was an hour-long video. I've never done anything like it. Wickerson Studios, a little bit of everything. Thanks to Carl Singline. Thanks to the C script that I'm getting from Jose Luis. Thanks for Mitch Farley. And just thanks to Mal Murr for getting me into Grasshopper about 3 years ago. And it's just so playful and fun to do. I don't know why somebody wouldn't be messing around with this. And my whole goal is to get out there and play with the kids and have some simulations out in the real foundry and have a blast and live life. So thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.